This is Jenna Burt, host of the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Hey, Jay, what's up, man?
You ready to talk movies?
I'm ready to talk movies. Let's do it.
Nice. Hello, Fear and Therapists. Welcome to the very last episode of Fear and There that we're recording in 2020. And really, depending on when we get around to publishing this, it might very well be the first episode of 2021. So how's that for fun? I'm Jay.
Fun. You're right.
Yeah. I'm Jay, and I'm calling in from Westchester, New York.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is a spicy relocation. This is Zachary, and I'm calling in from Beacon, New York. I just want to circle back real fast. Fear and Therapists is so good. Please, did you write that ahead of time, or was that just like right now?
Every now and again, I try to think of like if and when we ever become a podcast worthy of naming our listeners. I was thinking. We should have a name, and I'm just pilot testing some out. There's no reason to decide, but I think Fear and Therapist has been has been a front runner in the back of my brain for a while. So I don't know that I wrote it, but I definitely thought about it ahead of time.
Tremendous.
Although I'd basically be like Howard Stern if I could think of something that incredible, like right off the top of the dome, you know?
Well, I think with a little bit of practice and a lot of luck, you too could be like Howard Stern.
Well, I said Howard Stern because we're like on a modern version of a radio show, but there's probably better people for me to aspire to be.
Well, a Fear and Therapist immediately made me think of Dr. Fraser Crane.
Ah, yes, but neither of us have that voice, you know. Kelsey Grammer has such a singular voice, you know.
I'm listening, Seattle. Nope, that's not it. I can't do impressions.
It's
I've never
British,
been able to
right? It's also British, right?
It's not. I don't think it's British. I think it's more of like a classic mid-Atlantic accent. You know, it's
like the old timey.
Yes, yeah. I think it's a real thespian's accent. Yeah,
much like some of the accents in this movie that we watched.
Oh, baby! Oh, Rosemary's Baby.
Today, folks, we are talking about the 1968 Roman Polanski masterpiece, Rosemary's Baby, and you know, I think this marks like the sixth episode in a row or so that we have basically gone against what my prejudice was toward movies developed before the 80s. And we just keep doing these, you know, late 60s, early 70s films. And you know, I'm here for it. I think I've slowly been converted to some of these golden age horror flicks, and I was excited to watch this. But the reason that we watched this was a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and we have something of an announcement to make tonight. We were originally going to just do like a fun throwaway episode. I believe we were going to talk about Happy Death Day,
That's right.
which is I think one of those sort of cult junk food classics that everybody loved that came out, like 10 years ago or something. And we'll get around to that, I think, when we need a fun episode again soon. But Zach, what do you want to tell the folks your exciting news?
Well, we called an audible on Happy Death Day because Mandy and I, and Mandy you might know from previous episodes, Mandy and I found out that she is pregnant. And so, which is great. And I guess just as a joke, I don't know, did you suggest Rosemary's Baby or did I suggest it? But
I think you suggested it, and everything locked right into place. I think it was we happened to not have watched this film before. Well, I don't know if you had seen it. I had somehow never seen this movie.
You'd never seen. Oh, wonderful. Okay.
No, but we certainly haven't talked about it, obviously, and it's definitely not something that you and I hold in reverence or anything. So it felt like a movie that we could really paint with this new news of you welcoming the youngest Fear and Therapist into the world.
So I have to say this. I have to say this right off the bat because it is just too weird to keep close to my chest for any longer. But in Rosemary's Baby, it's not a spoiler to say that Rosemary, our protagonist, played by Mia Farrow, finds out that she is pregnant. In fact, that is what she is hoping for with her husband Guy. And their due date is June 28th. And
is that your due date?
Yeah, it is.
Dude,
I knew you were going to like that. I actually got Mandy to watch this with me, and we watched it over the last couple of nights. The timing was bad, and we couldn't do it in one fell swoop, which was too bad, but that's okay. And and the moment when she's about to say the due date out loud, and there's like somehow it's in slow motion, or at least it felt like that to us in retrospect, where she says June, and we were like, wait a second, 20, and we were like, okay, hold the phone. 8, and we both were just like, no way.
Oh my God. So
it was perfect, just perfect.
I have to also say that there is something, and maybe it's a little bit of, some of the wardrobe choices on Rosemary's part, or maybe just her short hair at the beginning. But, I don't think she's a spitting image, but she has a look that's similar to Mandy's as well.
Wow, that's interesting. I definitely disagree, but you can have your own opinion. That's cool.
Well, I mean, she's your wife, so you don't think she looks like anyone, right? Because, she's very important to you. But for me, she's not my wife, so I can compare her to anyone I want. I don't think she looks like Rosemary once Rosemary starts looking a little haggard, but
like chalk, I believe she's once described by one of her dear friends.
Hey,
says, "Horseman, you look like chalk.
You look like a piece of chalk." Well, yeah. Congratulations. I have to say it was definitely not a celebratory movie to watch, but I know that this is a big step for you. It would be a big step for anyone, and I think our small but loyal listener base here will be excited to hear the news for you. So,
well, I appreciate that, and I'm really excited that I don't know that I mean, if Mandy's going to be the mother, then that makes me Satan. According to Rosemary's Baby, so I'm excited. Well,
for this, my follow-up question was: did you guys have chocolate mouse on, on when you were trying, and was that chocolate mouse delivered from a creepy neighbor? Maybe.
I don't know. It's weird. I can't remember anything past 2 or 3 hours ago, and that's been true for a couple of months, right around the time that Mandy was pregnant, got pregnant. So I really, who knows.
It could just be quarantine.
It could be quarantine.
So, well, this is, a special episode, both because it is the last/first. This is our nice over the border episode, and it marks a very momentous occasion. So, let us all raise a glass to you, Zachary C. Solomon, and everyone say Mazel Tov with me together.
Oh, thanks, Jay. Yeah, here, l'chaim.
Okay, so let's talk about this film. So we already breezed through the context a little, and you even said that you watched it kind of over 2 nights with Mandy. Mm-hmm. So I watched it on my little tablet with some nice noise canceling headphones.
Ooh,
so I was really
nice.
I'm in the house with a lot of people and a lot of pets and stuff right now. We're all quarantining together at my girlfriend's family's house in Westchester, so that we can be safe, but also be with a small handful of people. And so it's a little hectic around here. So I had to manufacture some ambiance. But yeah, I think other than like maybe you were sort of missing out on the pacing a little by splitting it, but
right.
I think which I think a lot of people consider to be one of the strongest aspects of this film. Which I agree, it's a very steady movie. But I don't think you miss much else. This isn't a very dark movie visually. This isn't a particularly jumpy movie.
Right. No, in fact, the only way that I can these days, the only way I can get Mandy to watch a horror movie with me, and I regret this so much, but I told her about where'sthejump.com or .net or whatever it is, and that's what she checks now when I suggest a horror movie, and it's. Like, I don't look at it, if it's a movie I've never seen, obviously I don't want to spoil her in any way, shape, or form. But the problem is that when Mandy knows, she'll look at Where's the Jump, and she won't read what the jump scares are. She'll just note the timestamps. And so it still winds up being a spoiler for me, because I'll all of a sudden, I'm watching a film with her, and all of a sudden I look over at her, and she got the blanket over her head. So I know that the jump scare is coming. And
so you get it too. Then that's annoying.
So we're trying to work out a way for her to not telegraph the jump scare so well. But this movie, I mean, she looked at Rosemary's Baby, and it has a 0. I've never been to the website before. I just happen to know about it, so I don't know. Is it like a 0? There's like a 0 point out of 5 jump scare rating. So there's it's not a scary. I mean, it's not a scary movie. To your point.
No, I think it's an uncomfortable film, but I think there are some specific sort of modern, retroactively induced reasons that it is not scary, which I'd love to talk about when we get past the spoiler wall. But so like that's our context. That's the background that you need, I think, in this episode. And I also think we should just dispense with the would you recommend, because this movie, it doesn't get any more iconic and classic than this movie, except perhaps for something like Psycho or The Exorcist or something.
I mean, it's right up there. It's toe to toe with those films.
Yeah. So I think whether I thought it was a good movie and would rate it highly has no bearing on whether I recommend this film. It is part of it, and if you're a horror fan, you should get around to it eventually. That is my recommendation for this film. So, Zach, did you have any more context you wanted to lay in before we hop past the spoiler wall?
No, not really. I saw this movie for the first time, I want to say 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and the truth is that it was it's one of those things where like I remembered it piecemeal as I was watching the movie, but it didn't in any way detract. I mean, it's a movie that plays with dramatic irony, so you definitely know a lot more, or a certain amount more than Rosemary knows. So the joy is really just watching her uncover what's happening. As opposed to you necessarily watching yourself uncover what's happening. So even though I had seen it before, the pleasures were every bit as real as in fact, I probably liked this movie a lot more now than I did when I first saw it, just because I can see how this film rewards rewatches. So that's well said. I think in the complete opposite way than something like, I don't know, The Sixth Sense or whatever. Okay, great. Yeah, so let's hop past the spoiler wall. If this is your first time listening, and you have somehow not seen Rosemary's Baby, go check it out before listening to the rest of the podcast. You can pause us and then come back. We'd love to have you back. But otherwise, we're going to put the spoiler wall up right about now. Well, hello, Zach. Hello, Jay.
I love how I feel the need to re-greet you every time we do this.
Yeah, we've gone a distance together, and it's good to take a deep breath.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
look in the mirror. Yeah,
reassess. Building walls is hard work, and I think it's proven that it only guarantees you one election win and not 2. So,
that's a stupid joke, but I liked it. It was funny. It came out of nowhere. I liked it. It was good.
I'm pandering to you, really.
I know.
So quickly, I just wanted to ask you about the virtue of masterpieces. I think a lot of people consider this Polanski's masterpiece, though.
I mean, Polanski, you have Rosemary's Baby, you have Chinatown, you have Repulsion. I mean, there are other films of his that are fantastic, but those are the 3 that are sort of, I don't know. The consensus is that they are undeniable masterpiece, masterwork kind of.
Well, so I mean, like in that conversation, then like I would say Chinatown is more famous and more singular if you're talking about Polanski, just from my understanding of the history of cinema. But like Rosemary's Baby was a cultural moment, especially as it relates to horror films. Like this film was exceedingly successful in the box office. But didn't get the sort of Academy recognition that a more mainstream genre film might have. I mean, horror has always been the black sheep of horror, of movie genres. I think this was nominated for 2. This was nominated for what? For best supporting actress from Ruth Gordon, and then best adapted screenplay.
Okay, yeah,
and,
yeah.
And Ruth Gordon won. I mean, she deservedly. I think her performance in this film is incredible. In both subtle and completely ham-fisted kind of ways.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's hard. My point being with this, and I'll bring it around, is hard for me to watch a movie like this without being skeptical, if that makes sense. I somehow did not watch this movie until now, right? So I am perhaps the black sheep of horror fans, right? Because I just hadn't gotten around to it. I think I told myself I wanted to read the book first or something. Which is also like not getting around to reading a book is way, it's way more understandable than a movie.
Yeah, than not right than a 2-hour movie, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. As soon as you start throwing words like masterpiece and like one of the best or most iconic horror movies of all times, it just colors my viewing of the movie in a way that I hate. I like to be surprised, and I like to be. Not surprised, but I just like to go along for a ride cold, if that makes sense. Sort of like a really good example of this is I think you and I both, and this was a testament to the marketing of this film, you and I both were completely like hair blown back after watching Hereditary by Ari Aster, which, because nobody fucking knew anything about what that movie was going to be. Like, nobody, and frankly, the things lifted directly from Rosemary's Baby into Hereditary, which
and Midsummer for sure.
Yeah, we should talk about 100%. But I think there's just something. It's not the film's fault; it's the world's fault in this case. I didn't watch a trailer that spoiled anything. I don't know. So, what do you think about that from a contextual perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely know what you're saying, but I think that we diverge in our approach in some ways, because yes, if like a whole bunch of stuffy institutions were telling me that, like, no, I don't know, how do I want to say this? It depends on where you're learning, or where not learning, where you are being told, who is telling you that this film is a masterpiece. If a bunch of sort of faceless institutions are telling you that something is a masterpiece, that you don't have a connection to those institutions, you don't know who's writing the criticism, you don't know what it's like, behind those doors, then sure, I could see the skepticism. But if you're getting that information from a bunch of sources that you identify with, that you appreciate, that you respect, that you vibe with, then it's a little different. Like, I can't put myself back in the position of when I saw this movie for the first time, but I read, I actually don't know this if you are like this or you are not like this, Jay. This is, weirdly enough, this is not something we've talked about, but I am a voracious consumer of film criticism. I would say not a day goes by that I'm not reading a number of reviews from writers that I really love, going to different websites or reading magazines or whatever it is. And so, like, over the years, I've cultivated a bunch of names that I really, really like, that I know more or less that, if they like something, I'll like something. If they don't, then I probably won't. So, like, if those people tell me that something is a masterpiece, I'm not going to necessarily be skeptical. I'm going to be excited and hopeful that they're right. And so I'll watch the film with the hope that they're right and that I agree with them. So if I'm told that a movie is a masterpiece over and over again, I don't know. I don't have an issue with it so much. I don't think that. Okay, so here's my addendum to this. Here's my caveat. When I'm skeptical of when people say a movie is a masterpiece, when that movie just came out. Rosemary's Baby is a 50-plus-year-old movie. 50-plus-year-old movie. And it's still considered a masterpiece, or it's considered a masterpiece now after several decades. I'm inclined to believe that there's a decent reason, enough of a reason that I would agree with, for it to still have that title of masterpiece, that assessment. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, I remember when Midsummer came out, and I remember a critic I mean, nobody listens to our podcast, but I'm not going to say any names anyway. I remember a particular critic called it a masterpiece and said it was just like, a critic that I read pretty frequently said it was an absolute masterpiece. The movie is not a masterpiece. The movie is great and a ton of fun, but like there is serious recency bias in art criticism as usual, as always, which comes with the territory. So when I read a review that says that this movie that is still in theaters is a masterpiece, I just think to myself, you couldn't possibly have put enough distance between yourself and the work of art to know that it's a masterpiece.
Okay, so I appreciate your thoughts here, as they always do. They help me form my sort of opinion and sort of form what I was thinking here. We're talking about two things here. We're talking about recency bias, which is important. Because that is something that I rail against, or rail for, perhaps. I don't not rail against. Like I don't like that people are assuming that Halloween and The Exorcist are the best horror movies of all time, and nothing recent could possibly be as good as them. Which is a little bit what you're saying right now, not specifically, but you're kind of blanketing that, right? And so I want to get to that in a sec. But before the other thing you're talking about is you're talking about like, I need to be careful about whose opinions I let inform my viewing experience. And I need to parse that out myself. And I think that is interesting. And maybe you weren't saying it in so many words, but sometimes when... So I'll tell you where I heard this was a masterpiece from. Everyone. Like, just... Right. It's two groups. It's anytime somebody talks about horror movies that they like. Rosemary's Baby comes up a lot if you're a horror fan. So word of mouth is a big part of it. But it's also just lists. You Google the most iconic horror movies of all time. Every publication that we like, that we don't like, that we've never heard of, has made a list like this. It is SEO fodder. And it is helpful for businesses to have this. Now, the problem is, and I'm going to go back to my professional career a little here. When you start talking about top lists, you run into two problems. One, a lot of times these lists are intended to just stir up trolls and shit in the comments. But a lot of times these lists are culled from other lists because you have a 21-year-old writer who some editor was like, hey, we need the 25 best horror movies on Netflix, or whatever.
Oh my God.
And
yep.
How do you, as a 21-year-old writer who maybe is a horror fan, and that's why you were picked, but to write the article, but how do you know any of that information institutionally? You don't. You have to do research. And where do you do research? And then it starts to depend how thorough of a researcher are you? And then you start looking, oh, well, every list has Rosemary's Baby in the top 5, so I need to put it in the top 5 because that's the only way I'll be able to sell to my editor that this is actually true. Like, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's interesting that you're talking about the critic thing. I think I would agree with you if it was a movie like Black Christmas, which we reviewed last episode. That movie is on a lot of lists, but it's also not on a lot of lists because it flew under the radar. But I would argue that the quality of that film, for me personally, my viewing was so high, so much higher than I would normally give a 70s classic, and because of my bias, my perhaps stupid millennial bias. But I think it's interesting that I think I'm going to rate Black Christmas higher than Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, wow.
Spoiler alert for the end of this episode.
Remind me what you gave Black Christmas.
I gave Black Christmas, I think, a 4.5.
Okay.
I don't think I'm giving Rosemary's Baby a 5. So, and I don't think I'm going to give it a 4.73 or something stupid. Like, I might land on 4. I don't know. So, it's interesting because it colors my viewing of a film so very much. Now, the other point you made was recency bias and all that stuff. I got to ask you, because when you start saying things like that, then I'm going to have to throw, throw some wrenches into your thought process. How many years does a movie need to be out for you to if you're going to start saying the recency bias and something can't be a masterpiece until it's had time to cook and fester and stew, which is kind of what you're saying. You got to give me a number. I'm going to be the troll asshole here and ask you for a number of years that a movie needs to be out for you to consider it a masterpiece.
All right. Well, if you want me to, this is an asinine question. No offense intended.
Well,
so,
I want to get confrontational with you, you know?
All right, fine. Then if you want me to put a number on it, then I'll say 2 years. It doesn't need to be very long. I'm just saying that in the information age with the 24-hour news cycle and all that bullshit, people get really, really excited about something, and it goes viral, and they talk about it nonstop, and then the award season ramps up, and that fuels the fire, and then it dies down, and then people start to forget about it. And it's exactly when people start to forget about it that you can finally approach a piece of art and try to take it on its own terms. And it starts to maybe be a little bit devoid or a little bit distanced from its context, which you want when you're, I mean, you go to see a movie when it first comes out and you've got the hype in your ears and you've got the trailer in your mind and you've got the tweets and you've got the early reviews and all that shit. And you see the movie and you take it in the middle of the cultural context, and that's important. And then you wait 2 years and you watch it again when no one's talking about it and you've kind of forgotten it. Mm-hmm. Then you can have your real assessment of it. Like, I think that's exactly when. You know, people were so stoked about movies like Green Book and it won the fucking Academy Award, and now nobody's talking about it. And in fact, when anybody brings up a movie like Green Book, they're like, oh, this was racist drivel. This was a stupid movie that we were all a little bit carried away about. So, like, to me, it doesn't need to be a very long time at all. I think you have a cultural read of a piece of art, and then you have your attempt at a slightly more objective or perhaps a more timeless engagement with the work of art. So that's what I'll say 2 years. I mean, it's arbitrary, of course, but I don't think it needs to be decades.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we don't need to belabor the point any further. I think it comes down to what we want in a genre, and you put it nicely before that horror is the black sheep of the Oscars. I mean, you said it in relation to the Oscars, but it is a black sheep, full stop, when it comes to genres. I don't think any genre is as singular because, you know, if you put it up against like a rom-com or a chick flick, you know, something that is more considered, you know, whatever the polar opposite of horror films would be. Maybe that would be Christian movies. I don't know. But you know, rom-coms have to be sort of the opposite of horror, and it tends, horror has historically felt gendered because of how it's been marketed and, you know, how it treats women. But, you know, I also have plenty of female friends that love horror, so this is not exactly a great comparison. But
no, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
but rom-coms also often get thrown aside at awards season, and, you know, I don't know what, or not even just rom-coms, but like modern romances and stuff tend to, you know, depending on their quality, I don't know, like was The Notebook nominated for Oscars? I would assume it wasn't. I assume it wasn't nominated for that many, if any. So you could consider that a snub because a lot of people consider that an incredibly able movie with incredible performances, and so that award season is part of it, but it's horror movies. If you don't like horror, you won't even watch it. I don't really like rom-coms, but I'll watch them. Like, horror is a thing that is interesting because it's sort of, unless it's incredible, a lot of the stuff that people want in a horror movie tends to like cheapen its quality. For some people, for people who are watching it like a mainstream,
make it totally inaccessible. Right.
Yep. And what I mean by that is I don't look for the things that this movie gave me in what I want in a horror movie. Like, I keep talking about Hereditary. I'm not an Ari Aster fanboy in the same way that a lot of people are. But Hereditary to me is the perfect balance of what this movie provided and what something like the first Paranormal Activity provided. I want a movie that scares me mercilessly, you know, in the moment and after the fact. I want a hard movie to watch. But I also want it to be high quality and have good pacing and give me something to chew on artistically, aesthetically. So this movie gave me a lot in the latter, but it did not give me a lot in the former.
Yeah.
And so
fair enough.
That's part of it. And I think your point on recency bias, so I don't think it's recency for you. Your 2 year mark I was expecting you to say more. Your 2 year mark, literally what you're saying, it's not recency. I mean, depending on how you're defining it, it's you want to avoid the hype. I think the hype around Hereditary was correct, but the hype around what was that Cabin movie? I always forget what it was. The Lodge. It basically was like this movie got so much hype around awards season, and it was like it was like the Sundance darling horror film. Everyone was talking about it. It was going to be the next Hereditary. You and I watched it, and despite the hype, it was bad for us. So
yes.
So I think hype is a double-edged sword. It can be. But it seems to me like you would be willing to discuss whether any Ari Aster movie is a masterpiece, or whether I don't know, The Witch by Eggers is a masterpiece, or It Follows, or The Babadook. Like, you would discuss that because enough time has passed. But the other factor is you have to look at this director's output. I think both Eggers and Aster and Emily Kent, or Jennifer Kent, rather.
Jennifer, yeah.
All three of them have such potential for a masterpiece. Like, Eggers' new movie that's coming out soon is like a star-studded, bloody Viking horror movie, which could be incredible. Could be all. I mean, I don't know. It's hard, and I think what I'm getting at with masterpiece is like Polanski is a name. That is a name, and I think this is considered his masterpiece, and it dragged. It set the expectations too high even after the fact for me.
Well, yeah, so I this is a point of clarity that I brought this up earlier, but we got sidetracked. You say it's considered his master. Are you saying it's considered his best film, or it's considered a movie of his that is a masterpiece? Because they're different things. One a magnum opus being his best movie, or a masterpiece just being like a filmmaker can have multiple masterpieces. So
that's kind of your interpretation. I think if people are saying his masterpiece, I think they mean his magnum opus. I think people consider this.
That's a misinterpretation. It's using the word wrong then. A masterpiece originally comes from the Renaissance, and it's essentially the piece of art that you did to show other people in the guild that you were good enough to finally be a member of that guild. Yeah, the word is being used wrong.
So, well, now you're being strict about the use. I think if somebody contextually says his masterpiece, like, I know what they mean.
Okay. All right, so fine. I'm with you now. It was confusing to me. I got you.
But I also don't know that I would call this a masterpiece if it came out 2 years ago. Like, if this came out next to Hereditary, and again, like, cultural implications and what I expect from a horror movie, this is my personal opinion. So,
sure.
But let's put this topic to bed. I think it's again us talking about people talking about movies, which is not good.
Fair enough.
Let's move to gaslighting, because I think this is the meat of what this movie is trying to say, and more specifically with the book. What the book, I think it's the same title. Yeah. What the book by Ira Levin is trying to say, which is the concept of, believing victims and gaslighting. And we're in this age of Me Too right now, where there's like a stronger name and a stronger movement behind this concept. But this entire movie, my thoughts on this were like, this is the obvious theme, right? Because it's literally what's happening in the movie. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about The Platform, which The Platform also has a metaphor or serves as a metaphor for something that it also is directly about. So if you look at like The Platform's trying to comment on, class inequality and hunger and poverty and whatever, but it's literally depicting people in a class system who are starving. Like, so it's like, is it an effective or is it a very like astute metaphor? This movie is representative of a woman is spending the entire time saying, oh, I think something's wrong. I have this pain, or, oh, I think something's wrong. These people are trying to steal my baby, or, oh, my doctor might not be giving me the right medicine. Like, all these things, which are direct plot points in the movie, and everybody is downplaying, saying she's misunderstood, or you're crazy, or you don't understand. But that's also the message we're supposed to take from the movie. So I think was effectively done in this movie. whereas it was not effectively done in the platform, but they're essentially the same execution. So I'm wondering, and maybe you deny that conceit, but I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about why it was so effective in this movie, but is so like eye roll heavy in something like the platform.
The difference is that the platform as a whole is about a ridiculously overwrought metaphor about a very simple idea, whereas Rosemary's Baby is the idea itself. I mean, the Rosemary's Baby is not about gaslighting so much as it features gaslighting nonstop. It's not so much about the fact that women so often don't have autonomy and don't have agency and control over their own bodies and minds, as opposed to it's just that's what's happening in the actual movie. So,
but you don't think he was trying to bring that issue to light and get people to talk and think about it?
No, I do, and I think it's actually what one of the comments that Mandy made to me after the film, and I think she's right. It's like it's so difficult to reconcile the fact that this is a startlingly feminist film that passes the Bechdel test in 1,000 different ways by, already halfway through the movie. And you think about who Polanski is as a human being, and he's just an absolute scumbag, garbage human being. And it's like, it's really hard to reconcile those two things because this is a pretty socially progressive film. But he as a person is the scum of the fucking earth. So it's like, it's really confusing in some ways that he could make a film like this. So no, I certainly don't disagree that this film is
it's interesting. You brought some context in that prevented you from seeing it as an honest, deeper message. So what do you think? Why do you think he made this movie then?
No,
I don't mean like it sounds like you agree with me in thematic choices, but they're obvious. They're not thematic. This is what the movie is about. Is sort of what I'm saying. But you found it a little disingenuous for Polanski.
No. You're projecting or not projecting. You're reading too much into what I said. I did not find it disingenuous. In the late 1960s, I can't pretend to know the first thing about this person personally. I don't have a hard time believing that there are awful people out there who can compartmentalize, like that, who can say things like, I'm a feminist, or I'm an anti-racist, or I'm a decent person who does decent things in one voice, and then in another voice, says absolutely abysmal, awful things. I don't have a hard time believing that people compartmentalize like that all the time. So I don't have a hard time believing that he made this film. I don't know that this is true, but it wouldn't surprise me if he made this film because he wanted to show how impossibly hard it is to be a woman, especially a pregnant woman in a world of older white men who want to control that woman's body and make decisions for her. So, yeah, this film is one of the things that is so surprising about this film is how progressive it is in terms of its gender politics, and it is. I mean, she has absolutely fabulous women friends who want to take care of her, and like. It passes the Bechdel test. It really is a movie in some ways that is an indictment of the way that men treat women. And that's something. I mean, I think that was really cool about the film. It is hard to reconcile it, like I said, with who Polanski is as a human being. But I could see how it happened. Yeah.
Well, it's also a little hard to reconcile it with the ending. Because the ending is intentionally, I guess, ambiguous. I think we're led to believe that she's just like, all right, well, I get to care for my baby now. So I'm going to move forward caring for my baby. My assumption would be that the cleaner ending would be that she takes the baby and jumps out the window or something, like
sure.
She kills the spawn of Satan and herself.
Which might be good for humankind, right?
Yeah. Right. Which, and takes this victory away from the cult, which is, representative of, like you said, old white men trying to, control this woman's reproductive system. But she doesn't do that. She rocks the baby, sort of smiles a little, and then the movie bookends nicely with zooming out of her apartment and hovering over New York, and that's it. So I don't know, like, how do you reconcile it with that ending? Because that ending, and I don't know, maybe the point is like that's the way the world works. Like nothing big and definitive happens
what's your
to solve the
problem?
problem.
What's your what do you find to be the contradiction here with the ending?
I mean, the contradiction is she's just accepting that men are controlling her body.
Oh, I mean, I don't really see it that way. I see that she never accepts it until the very end. She is hiding pills and trying desperately to rage against this horrible system that she's in. But she is this fucking Antichrist's mother, and you know, I don't know.
Well, that's my point. Like
it's like you know, did you ever see the Lynn Ramsey movie? We Need to Talk About Kevin.
No.
You know, it's a really, really, really intense, very uncomfortable drama with Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly, and they're the I think it's John C. Reilly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, they're the parents of a boy named Kevin who is a psychopath, and I won't spoil that film. But that's a film that takes a real sort of realist look at being the parent of essentially, I mean, I won't use the word evil because I don't really believe in that, but whatever, I will as a good shortcut, right? Like, it's essentially a movie about what it's like to be the mother of an evil child. And I don't know. It paints a pretty convincing portrait of the tension there between realizing that your kid is bad for the world, but also the understanding that your kid is your kid and you gave birth to that thing and you love that thing unconditionally, and it's your job in some respects to be that thing's parent. And
but that's like what the old man, this whatever his name is, this anagram guy, Roman, which the fact that that's his first name is ridiculous. Well,
also as Mandy pointed out, I mean, Guy's last name, his last name is Cassavetes, which is essentially Cassavetes, which is, you know,
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
the actor's last name. Yeah. Right. I think, again, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying. I just don't see. It's what you're saying is it makes sense about, you know, she's a mother. She has to kind of like to be the job, but that's exactly what this Roman guy is saying. He's like, this thing would be much happier if you're his mother, right? We're already like taking breast milk from you from next door. Like, we need you to be the mother. We don't need these old ladies who one of them is obviously crazy, with the Coke bottle glasses. We don't need her to be this thing's mother. We need you. And then she sort of accepts. So I don't know. I just have trouble. I have trouble with a movie that is trying to say women deserve more agency and control, with her literally accepting a command at the end of the movie. Now, you're bringing up laws of nature and mother, and that's just how I read it. So,
but I disagree with your assessment. I don't think that she's accepting what Roman is telling her. I think that she is independent of him and his comments and his pressure. Independent of it, she is too attracted by the pull of being the Antichrist's mother, because she is literally its mother.
I mean, yeah, she literally is.
I think that the movie is rubbing salt in the wound by having Roman want it also. That these two people are actually aligned by a common cause here. She wants to be a mother so badly. She wanted it since the opening scene of this movie, pretty much. And he wants her to be the mother because it just fits his, his Satan protocol. So I think that's part of the genius of the ending of this movie, is that these two enemies actually have a common cause, and that makes it even bleaker, even sadder in some ways.
Yeah, well, and the ending is desperately sad. I just feel I don't know. So maybe bleak. I was looking for more of a solution presented. I think. Yeah, I don't know. Because there's a lot you can draw from, like, I mean, literally, this is a child of rape, right? So just because his father is Satan, should this baby be killed? Like,
right.
It sort of brings up the concept of, like, should you definitely abort a baby if it's the product of rape? You know, like if you really want the baby, I don't know. Like it's heady stuff. But let's move on to less hairy subjects and talk about Satanism.
Okay.
So unless there's anything else you wanted to add, but I think...
No.
You and I both agree that the feminist read of this movie is strong, obvious, easy to take. I just don't think it was as, I don't know, like clean and poignant as I think you felt it was, and clearly the world has felt it is this whole time. So satanic panic is something that I think people would consider. There's a lot of things that relate to this, but I think a lot of people, the matter of the occult in modern American society kind of starts with the Manson stuff. I think I'm being reductive intentionally here.
Okay.
But there was a rash of movies around this time that dealt with the devil, the most famous of which was The Exorcist. And The Exorcist was an insane success, you know, in as a cultural moment. And frankly, so is Rosemary's Baby. And right around this time, 1969, was when the Manson murders happened. And they were also about like a cult, a pseudo-Satanist cult. You know, Charlie Manson wasn't like an overt Satanist, but there were some parts of his sort of like gospel that dealt with it. The satanic panic actually is later. I think it's like in the 80s when there were some scandals about like kindergartens abusing children in the name of Satan, and there was like a lot of things that came up in like pop culture. But it kind of feeds off of this stuff. And so what I think is, so what's interesting in this movie is the reason I think I did not like this movie that much is because so many of the movies that get me to my core we've talked about this, demon movies are my thing. Like, not my thing is in I love them. My thing is in they're the things I can't sleep after watching. And a lot of those movies steal shit from The Exorcist. So like The Exorcist would still scare me probably, even though other movies have done it since. But in this movie trumpets a completely different type of the occult, and that is cults. You know, that is as these coven things. Which a lot of more modern movies have been pulling a lot more from. And I think they've done it better because you look at, again, I'll say, like you look at Hereditary or something similar, or even, frankly, Paranormal Activity, and you think these movies combined The Exorcist with Rosemary's Baby, essentially. That's what they are. They're movies about an occult, a secret society that is infiltrating, pulling strings, blah, blah, blah. But then they always end with like a big explosive possession third act. Right. So this movie did not have a possession third act, right? So I think that was part of it. This movie had been done before by movies that came out more recently for me, because I saw Hereditary, I saw Paranormal Activity, I saw all of these sort of Exorcist movies before I saw this movie. And so seeing it in the reverse pulled some of the teeth out of the movie for me. I was curious for you, in, you know, from that perspective, seeing the sort of retroactive influence this movie has had on so many films. Did that color your viewing at all in this movie in relation to like dealing with Satanism, but not with possession?
No, not really. It wasn't something that was on my mind, really. I mean, yeah, it's always fun to spot the effects of the influence of a major movie like this, you know, on its descendants. I think you maybe mentioned the sort of impregnation, seance-y summoning scene. I mean, that obviously everyone's naked. That totally calls to mind Midsummer. I mean, yeah, no, I don't know. I think it's a really. I'm happy to listen to you talk about this because it's not something that I think about too much, and I don't. And I'm not. You tend to be, as a fan of horror movies, way more knowledgeable about like what flavor of horror movie. And I don't mean subgenre exactly. I mean more like is this Catholicism? Is this Protestantism? Is this a possession movie? Is it a demon movie? Is it a haunting movie? You know, like I mean, I love all of it. I love all of that stuff. And I love to hear you talk about it. I just don't really think about it too much. Like I don't know.
So this is part of how you're watching the movie. So I'm curious then, let's not talk about that. I mean, I'll talk about it a little bit, but what was scary in this movie to you? Like, what was effective from a thematic perspective then, other than obviously like the feminist undertones? Like, what were the atmospheric things that you found to be truly scary in this film for you?
I think that's a fair question. Very fair question. But I think my answer, I think you kind of like what I found truly scary about this movie was how completely realistic it was in every way except for the part of the witches and Satan and Antichrist.
Which is the thing that she is being gaslit about.
Exactly. But her treatment and oh my God, it's so awful and it's so real feeling to me. At the way that she just has no control of her body, the way that people are consistently mean to her, the way that they treat her, the way the men in her life, the men outside of her life, the total bleakness, the cruelty. Oh my God. To me, it's pure horror when she visits Dr. Hill near the end of the film, and for a period, you actually think that she's going to have some reprieve, and you see her relax for the first time in the whole movie, and she closes her eyes and she lies back on the couch because she knows that she finally has found a person in an authority, in a position of authority who believes her, and then of course, he doesn't even for a heartbeat. He even says, "Oh, can I see the book?" He feigns belief. He's totally like agreeing with what he perceives to be her delusion because he doesn't want to upset her. And then right behind her back, she calls Dr. Saperstein and her husband, these two men who need to come and control her because women are hysterical and they behave hysterically. So
I thought that was the most desperate part of the movie for me too. I have it jotted down. And I think that was the part where I was like, okay, this movie about, like we're saying, gaslighting and female agency is now about something that would be scary if it happened to anyone, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I agree with you there.
So I mean the shit that felt like real life was the scariest stuff for me. Absolutely, was the stuff that was totally and completely believable. Ruth Gordon's character Minnie is so goddamn obnoxious that like she's hard. She was hard for me to watch. Like she is so obnoxious that she's scary in her own way, but like atmospherically, I mean, yeah, there are attempts at like visceral scariness, not as you said, not conceptual scariness, not thematic scariness, but like visceral scariness, with the score. And I mean, this movie has smash cut after smash cut, and there are things, and it moves at a serious clip, and it's definitely, there are attempts at visceral fright. But none of it. Like I was not scared by this movie. We'll get to our sheep rating, but mine is incredibly low. It is not a scary movie to me by really any stretch, other than the sort of the social scariness.
There is a pit in your stomach that you feel, when you walk into the room at that last scene. Sure. Which is a very sinking feeling. I think that in conjunction with that Dr. Hill moment at the end, is just, yeah, I agree with you there. And what's interesting, you're sort of arriving at the point that I'm trying to make with this, is this movie is not scary because of the Satanism at all. And I think maybe that's why I didn't find it scary, and maybe because of what I look for in a horror movie, that's why I don't like this movie as much as people like this movie. Because, like you look at a movie like Moonlight or something, that movie has a lot to chew on from a cultural perspective. And for like I said, from an ideological perspective, from all of this, and that movie is also not really metaphorical. It's also about the thing that it's about, right? But I think that one can stand outside of its genre as a movie about this. This movie has to be a horror movie, and it has to be a movie about real world horrors, if that makes sense. And
Definitely.
and I think that that's something that's hard for me to reconcile because I'm so used to seeing a possessed woman writhing around on the ceiling. like I don't know. And it's really interesting because I feel I commend you for being so bulletproof this whole episode. I've thrown like a lot of bullshit at you. And I think you've just been like, no, fuck you. You're wrong. This is what I'm saying. And you didn't say that, you and I think are better friends than that. But
No,
I think,
of course.
I think this is a classic example of us diverging clearly.
Yeah, right.
But I think we're both arriving at the same thing. It's just my experience was more detrimental because of the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of supernatural scares in this movie.
Fair. Totally. It's funny. I was looking at, and I don't know, what I'm about to say might be a natural segue into our ratings. Is that okay? Or is there something else? Is there one more, something else you want to add in?
No, there's lots of things we could talk about. Like did you see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the new Tarantino movie?
I did.
Like the problem is I was also colored by that because, there's the Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski, Charlie Manson connection. And that movie is not factual, but Sharon Tate was married to Roman Polanski and was murdered while she was married to Roman Polanski.
And very far along in a pregnancy too.
Right. And Charlie Manson, cults, etc. Like there's something like reverse ironic poetic about the real world insinuation of this stuff. And we could talk about it. I don't know. And I'm not like I don't love reading about Charlie Manson. So like I haven't read Helter Skelter. I haven't, this isn't something I'm super fascinated by. But I am interested in that connection because that related a little bit to what I was reviewing in this movie. And perhaps I was looking too far into that because of my sort of real world historical understanding of who Roman Polanski was and who and what the occult was in the late 60s and early 70s. And then obviously The Exorcist to come out, 4 years after this or something. So yeah, a lot of it was colored by the, what people consider to be virtuous about this movie, but also just how it lived in 1968 through 1974. It lived in this world that I had so many different expectations. And it turns out this movie wasn't about any of that. This movie was not about any of that. This movie was about gaslighting and feminism and has really nothing to do with Satanism. Which is weird to say, and that disappointed me. But that's just sort of, that was all I wanted to say. So I think feel free to do your little segue point because I think we've arrived at the point that I wanted to arrive at. So,
well, I was just going to say because on the topic of us diverging and how this is sort of the paradigm of our divergence. That I was looking through. I looked back at all the movies that we've done. And was remembering what I rated them all, and I was sort of surprised to find out that this movie will be my highest rated movie on this podcast.
What was your highest rated movie prior to this?
Well, funny enough, yes, no, I do. Funny enough, my highest rated movie prior to this was the very first episode we did. Which do you remember what that was?
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Also,
right. Also 1974. Also. Kind of it's not a overtly a cult movie, but it's a movie where everyone's involved and you don't know it till the end, so yeah, sorry, keep going. But I think that's funny.
Yeah, no, I totally 1974. I thought it was late in, it is 1974. Funny. Yeah, that's funny.
I think it is, right?
No, I just confirmed. You're totally right. You're totally right. So anyway, yeah. So should we do it? Should we do our ratings?
Yeah. Yes. So the listeners, if you have suffered this long through our pseudo disagreement here, we rate our films on two two scales. The first being our scale of general scariness, which is our sheep scale, as in how many sheep it takes you to fall asleep. We rate it from 0 to 5 sheep. So Zach, tell the people how scary you thought this movie was.
1 sheep for me, which is not nothing, and it's just for the reasons that I just outlined, that there's enough real life plausibility in this film to make it a bit scary. But as we were just talking, there's really there are no like real visceral scares in it. There's no visual scare in this movie at all. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no trouble sleeping.
Yeah, I'm a 0. I'm a goose egg on this, and it's why this movie is going to get a lower rating than frankly all the people who are better at rating movies than me. I wanted it to be scarier because it's about subject matter that tends to scare me. And it just didn't. And it seemed like it was an intentional choice. Like we said, I appreciate the discussion because you helped me to formulate why I didn't like this movie. Because it is not about the thing that I find effective in horror movies, and that seemed intentional. You know, there's something very inherently scary about Satanism and being possessed by the devil. Like something desperately scary about that. And this movie was basically saying, yeah, that's scary, but you know what's scarier? Living life as a woman being told that you are wrong all the time. Like, so yeah, I think it's scary. It wasn't scary in the ways that it delivered it to me. So it's a 0 for me. Dog. And then this second rating is just our quality rating. We rate it from 0 to 5 stars or pentagrams because we keep it spooky around here.
24/7.
And this is just your standard quality rating. So Zach, are you an even 5 on this one?
For the first time in Fear and Their history, I'm giving a movie a 5-star rating. This is a 5-star rating for me. This is a perfect movie. It is, as you like to say, a masterpiece. And let me ask you this: is it his masterpiece? I don't know. I'll have to go back. I have to go back and watch all the rest of his movies. I probably won't do that because this was sort of an exception. But this is a masterpiece to me. Absolutely. I'm so in love with this movie.
Yeah. So my rating. I keep going back and forth. So last week we watched 1974's Black Christmas, the original. And I rated that movie 4.5 stars, I believe. And I did that because I wanted to rate 4 stars to be, with it, right? Like I wanted people to know that I knew contextually that was a 4-star movie, right? Like trying to save some horror cred, some horror face. But then you told me to just fucking rate it what I wanted to rate it, I believe. You said, no, go for it. That's great. And so I rated it 4.5 stars, which I think would get a lot of disagreement from people. I think that movie would be considered a 3.5 or 4-star movie by most people. Now, with a movie like this, when you get into what I was saying before, this movie, I've been told, is a masterpiece. I have been told it is one of the best, most iconic horror films of all time. So my gut tells me I need to add 0.5 to my rating.
No, why don't you just think for yourself for once in your life? Jeez Louise.
If I think for myself, I'm giving this movie 3.5 stars.
Good, then give it 3.5 stars.
This is like really exposing. It's exposing something about me that we knew, but I need a movie to be scary for me. Like, I need a movie to be supernaturally scary for me. Or I guess like bloody. I don't know. I think like there's some.
Are you sure you're not getting a little strangled by genre here? Like by labels? Like if somebody told you that this was a psychological thriller where they told you it was a drama and you watched it, you might not have. You would have gone in with different expectations.
Probably,
you wouldn't have expected supernatural scariness. You might have liked it more.
I can't watch it again with different expectations, though. So it's like
that's true.
You're right. I am strangled by genre, specifically not horror. I'm strangled by the demon Satan subgenre.
I know you are. That's your thing.
and it's so interesting that
the Schneider thing.
It fucked up my rating for this movie, because I really do think, honestly, I had a 3.5-star experience. I wasn't scared. I recognized so much value in this movie. This movie is so well done. The music is incredible. We didn't even talk about the sets or the pacing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, well, it's because we got bogged down with shit that, like, I think it's I knew it would happen with this movie. It's why I sort of tried to, like, drive the conversation ahead of time, because I didn't want to talk about cinematography and writing and pacing, because this movie's obviously a 5 out of 5 in all of those categories. Like, the way that this movie is shot and the way that the story is told is so it's incredible. And I think there's a reason people consider this an expert film. I think genre ruined it for me, and I think that that's really interesting as a thing to look back on. I think we're going to look back on it 4 or 5, 15 episodes down the road and be like, wow, I mean, it makes sense based on who I am and what I expect from a movie, and specifically a horror film. And you put it well. If this was a different movie, a different genre, I might have treated it better. But
I mean, you watched Black Christmas expecting a slasher film, and that's exactly what you got, and you had a great time with it. I mean, I gave it a 4-star rating also. I mean, I knew it was a slasher movie, and I was like, oh shit, this is one of the best slasher films I've ever seen. I loved it, you know?
Yeah.
It happens. We definitely get, also we rate things against their genre, right? Like 4 stars, like a 4-star rom-com, you can't really compare a 4-star rom-com to a 4-star World War II film. You know what I mean? It's like they're both, to me, I see those two different ratings, and I think, okay, so a 4-star rom-com means that it's a 4-star movie that stacks up against other rom-coms, and a 4-star, war movie stacks up against other war movies.
Is there a genre that the rating is absolute then? Dramas?
No, well, that's a good question, actually. I don't know. I mean, I don't think so, because when you're talking about an absolute rating, I feel like you're getting into the territory of objectivity, which is impossible. There's not, so I mean, we might have a consensus, but a consensus is just a group of opinions. So I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's well put, because I think, like, if people are saying that this movie is in the top 3 horror films of all time, like, some people would consider this the Citizen Kane of horror movies, right? Like, like, you have to start talking about it in that lens, because you're narrowing it by genre. So I think that this movie was very well done, and I'm not breaking any critical ground by saying that. But I don't think this movie was as good as I would want from a horror film. So, take that for what it's worth. Zach, you can keep enjoying your movies exactly how you like them, because you have agency, and everyone should have agency.
Oh, thank God.
Thanks for chatting, Zach. Thank you, everybody else, for listening.
Fear and Therapists.
Fear and Therapists. We are signing off for the final time in 2020. And so, if you like what you heard, be sure to give us a follow on all of your podcast platforms. Check us out on the interwebs at fearandthere.com. You can also hit up Twitter, Instagram, Facebook with all of that, all the good social media garbage. We are Fear and There on those channels. And you can email us at fearandthere@gmail.com if you want to yell at me for rating Rosemary's Baby 3.5 stars, or if you would like to argue with Zach, he loves to do it. So,
let's do it. Bring it on.
That's it. Yeah. So, Zach, thanks again for chatting. Again, congratulations on your baby. May your baby not have horns.
Not be like Rosemary's.
Yep. And please deliver my congrats again to Mandy. And that wraps up this episode.
All right. Good night, everyone. Or goodbye, or whatever.
Bye, Zach.
Bye, Jay.